Hey everyone, welcome back to my kitchen. I wanted to start off my Thanksgiving series with a simple beginner-friendly recipe for cornbread dressing. Nothing too fancy, and everything I use will be down in the description box. So I'm going to start off with just 2 boxes of the corn muffin mix. I have 2 extra boxes just in case I feel like this isn't enough. We're going to put it in our pan and I will be able to tell. And I'll definitely put the final measurements in the description box. But I do have 2 extra ones as backup, and just remember that each box does need an egg, so I will put that on there, don't worry. And if all else fails, just have you a box of stovetop as backup. I absolutely love this stuff. I prefer this over the dressing. Last year was my first year really making it. Turned out great, but you cannot go wrong with stovetop. I know a lot of people hate it, but I love it, so it is what it is. I'm going to go ahead and preheat my oven to 400. I'm just going to do this exactly like the box says. However, I am going to add in just a little bit of sugar just because that's what I like. You do not have to do that. So I got my oven preheating and let's get started. Okay guys, so let's get started. I want to apologize in advance that this video is kind of long, but I just wanted to go through every single detail so that my beginners can kind of see how I did everything. Just take your time. If there's something you want to change, feel free to change it. You do not have to do it exactly like I did. This is just a general idea. And also, this is not your mama's, your Gigi's, your granny's, your uncle. It's nobody's cornbread dressing like that. It's just what I wanted to do, how I like it, and it's simple. So I just started off with 2 boxes of the Jiffy mix. I did end up adding in another box, so I did 3 in total, which called for 1 egg per box and 1/3 cup of milk per box. So I did an entire cup of milk and 3 eggs total, and of course, what's cooking without making a mess? But I just mixed all that together and I did let it sit for a few minutes. You can tell the texture changes after you let it sit for a few minutes. And I did have my oven preheated to 400, which is what the box directs you to do. Also, I did sneak in a few teaspoons of sugar. That's just because I like my cornbread a little bit sweet. You definitely do not have to do that if you're not a fan of sweet cornbread, but if you do like that, just add in a couple teaspoons here or there. And I also wanted to say that you could always buy your cornbread pre-made from the store if you're not confident in baking cornbread yet. Do not feel like you have to go ahead and jump into this if you're just starting off in the kitchen. Like I said, you can definitely just buy some cornbread pre-made and you'll be just fine. One thing I am going to suggest is that you use a 9x13 pan because it's a little bit thinner. Mine took a lot longer to cook, but just bake it as the box says and then just check the middle with a knife or a toothpick. Make sure it comes out clean and you'll be just fine. So I am going to put a big pot of water on the stove. Just for reference, this is a 5-quart pot and I'm adding in about maybe 3 to 4 quarts of water, and then I added in 2.5 tablespoons of chicken bouillon seasoning. You could always just use chicken broth. The chicken bouillon seasoning makes the broth for you and it's a cheaper option. And then I just added in 3 bone-in, skin-on chicken thighs. You can use chicken breast, you can use whatever chicken you have. Just let it boil, and then while that's boiling up, I'm going to chop up about 4 stalks of celery. I like to slice mine down the middle to make it easier to chop up, and then about half of a very large onion that I had. If you don't care for onion, you can definitely omit it, and you can also add in bell pepper. I did that last year. I just didn't really care to do it this year. So the chicken took about 10 to 15 minutes. Once it was done, I took that out and I set the broth aside. I just let it stay on low on another burner so it could stay warm. And then in my pan on medium heat, I melted 1 stick of butter. And you can see the cornbread back there. Of course, I was like munching on it because it tasted so good. But I'm going to go ahead and start sauteing up the celery and the onions. And I'm going to add in about 2 teaspoons of minced garlic. And then at this point, you can pretty much season this with whatever you would like. I decided to just do some garlic pepper. I didn't want to add any extra salt because at this point I was going to add in the can of cream of chicken. But once I started tasting this, guys, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. It tasted so good just the way it was, and I was so scared that the can of cream of chicken was going to ruin it. So what I'm going to do is make another video, and I'm going to compare the two with the can of cream of chicken compared to without the cream of chicken, but the way I made it without it tasted just fine. So while my onions and celery and everything was still sauteing up, I started breaking up the cornbread. My edges were a little bit burnt again because I used like a deeper pan and it took a lot longer for it to finish in the center. But that's fine. Just make sure your cornbread is completely cooled so you don't burn yourself and it doesn't like start sweating and getting all mushy. So mine was completely cooled by now. And I'm just going through and breaking some of that up. I used about half of the pan and I did end up adding in the rest later. Well, I guess I used 3/4 since I just broke that piece in half. But as you can see, my celery and my onions were nice and brown. So I had already turned the heat off on those. I didn't want them to burn. You just kind of want them to be translucent. So maybe about 5 to 10 minutes, just depending on how hot your stove is. And so I'm going to add all that in, scrape all that good butter out, and I'm just going to start incorporating this all together. And this is where you start adding in that chicken broth. So generally I would not measure this, but I did use a measuring spoon because I wanted you guys to see like how much I was adding, how much you might need if you are using boxed chicken broth. So I started off with about 2 cups. And if you did want to add the can of cream of chicken, I think this would be a great part to add it and maybe stop at the 2 cups. But once I try it, I will let you know. And then I'm going to go in with my sage and poultry seasoning. Do not be scared to be a little heavy-handed with this stuff. It doesn't give it like a salty taste, but it does give it a nice flavor. So don't be scared to just start throwing some of that in. Now I'm going in with the rest of that cornbread. I didn't add it all in at once because I was scared if I added too much broth, it was going to be too wet. So you could always add, but you can never take away. So that's why I did a little bit at a time. And then I just ended up adding the rest in there. Also, if you wanted to just do 2 boxes of Jiffy, I think that would work out just fine as well. So here I'm going in with another cup of the warm chicken broth. Going to mix that up, incorporate it very well. There's me making a TikTok behind the scenes, and I just went in with some more sage and poultry seasoning. Again, don't be scared to use that stuff. And this is when you want to start tasting your dressing. Start tasting to see if it needs salt, see if you want to add more broth, see what texture you're getting before you add the egg, because once you add the egg, you are not going to be able to taste it. So I went in with about another half a cup of the warm broth, and I'm just folding this all together, kind of getting it to the texture that I want. I do not like my food dry, but I also understand that some people don't really like a mushy consistency or texture. So this is going to be one of those things you want to kind of play around with. And as you can see, there's me tasting it. Also, I did put the spoon back in because nobody else was eating this but me, so don't worry. And I went in with a little bit of salt and some garlic pepper. Again, just start tasting it, seeing if you want more seasoning. And then that's the consistency that I kind of was going for. And then I ended up adding in another half a cup, so I have to total that up for you. But I ended up adding in another half a cup, and I think it was like the perfect consistency. I tasted it one more time before I added in 1 egg just to make sure, and then I just went in with a little bit more salt on top of the egg. It's just another layer of flavor, and I just incorporated the egg with the mixture. You can definitely put this into 1 pan. I'm going to split it into 2 to see how I like having the shredded chicken in the batch, just to see if it makes like a huge difference on the flavor. And spoiler alert, it definitely does. But I went ahead and filled 1 pan, and I sprayed both of my pans with some cooking spray. And with the rest of the cornbread dressing in the bowl, I went ahead and started shredding up that chicken that we boiled, and I just started adding it into the mixture. The chicken didn't have too much flavor on it. It wasn't like salty or anything from the chicken bouillon seasoning. So just You can't taste it because of the egg, but just know it might need a couple dashes of salt, nothing too crazy, just to give it a little more flavor. I will say if you are going to add in that can of cream of chicken, you probably won't have to worry about adding any extra salt because it'll probably be a little bit salty if you did. But again, just try to taste it before you add the egg so you kind of know where you stand on your seasoning level. So I went ahead and incorporated that shredded chicken into the dressing, and I filled my other pan. I had my oven set to 375 degrees, and I popped these in for about 35 minutes. My oven puts out a lot of heat, so just kind of watch it until it's nice and golden brown. And then this is the finished product once they were done. I think it tasted amazing. I'm glad I did not add the can of cream of chicken, but I will definitely give it a try. I will put all the ingredients down below. I cannot wait to eat this with some yams and some cranberry and some macaroni because this was pretty good. I was pretty proud of myself. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for the next recipe in my series, and I will talk to you guys in my kitchen soon. Bye.